The aspen leaves trembled overhead, their golden whispers barely audible above the ragged breathing that escaped Felicity Morgan's lips. She pressed herself deeper into the hollow between two gnarled roots, her fingers clutching the blood-soaked fabric of her traveling dress. The bullet wound in her thigh throbbed with each heartbeat, sending waves of fire through her leg. 24 hours ago, she had been reading Jane Austen to pass the time on the stagecoach from Billings. Now, she was alone in the Montana wilderness, the other passengers either dead or scattered to the wind. The attack had come at dawn, masked riders emerging from the mist like demons, their guns spitting death before anyone could cry out a warning. A twig snapped. Felicity's breath caught in her throat. Through the latticework of branches, she glimpsed movement. A rider picking his way carefully through the underbrush. The late afternoon sun caught the barrel of the rifle across his saddle, and her heart hammered against her ribs. They had found her. The men who had laughed as they shot old Mr. Pemberton, who had rifled through luggage while Mrs. Chatterley bled out beside the overturned coach. The horse drew closer, its rider a dark silhouette against the amber light. Felicity fumbled for the small derringer she'd hidden in her bodice, a gift from her late guardian in Boston, who'd insisted a woman traveling west needed protection. 2 shots, that's all she had. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the pearl handle. "Easy there." The voice was low, steady, not the harsh bark of the outlaws. The rider dismounted with practiced ease, and as he stepped into a shaft of sunlight, Felicity saw him clearly for the first time, tall and lean, with shoulders that spoke of hard work rather than mere size. His face was weathered but not old, perhaps 35 summers, with eyes the color of winter sky. A tin star glinted on his vest. "Sheriff Nathan Reed, Whispering Pines," he said, holding his hands away from his weapons. "I've been tracking the men who hit that stage. You hurt." The derringer slipped from Felicity's numb fingers. They shot me, my leg." Nathan's expression tightened as he took in her pallor, the dark stain spreading across her skirt. He moved closer, slow and careful like approaching a spooked mare. "May I?" She nodded. Beyond caring about propriety, Boston society would be scandalized. But Boston society hadn't bled in the dirt while murderers hunted them through the woods. Nathan knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he examined the wound through the torn fabric. His jaw clenched. "Through and through. You're lucky. Missed the artery, but you've lost blood, and it needs cleaning before infection sets in." "The others," Felicity whispered. "The coach." "I know." His voice carried weight that spoke of things seen and endured. "Found what was left this morning. Been following your trail since noon." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You did good, getting this far. Most wouldn't have made it out of that clearing." A sob tried to claw its way up her throat. She'd run, left them all behind. What choice had she had? But the guilt gnawed at her like hunger. "Hey." Nathan's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. "You survived. That's not a sin, that's strength." "It hurts," she breathed, meaning more than just the wound. Something shifted in his expression, understanding deeper than mere sympathy. "That's why I'm here," he said simply. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe, but I need to stop this bleeding first." He worked quickly, efficiently, cutting away fabric with a knife that appeared from his boot. Felicity bit down on her cry as he tied a bandage tight around her thigh. "My cabin's about 3 miles north," Nathan said, helping her to her feet. She swayed, and his arm came around her waist, solid as oak. "Can you ride?" I don't know." "You can." There was no doubt in his voice, as if his certainty could lend her strength. "Storm's coming. We need to move." He whistled low, and his horse, a rangy bay gelding, ambled closer. Nathan lifted Felicity into the saddle as if she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. His arms came around to take the reins, and she found herself leaning back against his chest, too exhausted to maintain proper distance. "Why?" she asked as they began moving through the deepening shadows. "Why help me?" Nathan was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because nobody should face their worst day alone. And because those men, Blackwood's gang, they've taken enough from good people." The name sent ice through her veins. Even in Boston, she'd heard whispers of Jake Blackwood and his raiders. "Will they follow?" "They might." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "But they won't find you, not while I'm breathing." The certainty in his words should have been mere bravado, but something in his tone made her believe. This man had faced down darkness before and survived it. "I came west to teach," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than pain. "The Whispering Pines School Board hired me. I was supposed to start next week. Miss Morgan, then, heard we were getting a new school marm from back east." A pause. "Reckon the children can wait another week or two." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind picked up, sending the aspens into a frenzy of whispers. Nathan urged the horse faster, and Felicity gripped the saddle horn as the movement sent fresh agony through her leg. "Almost there," he murmured, and she wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. The trees began to thin, and through her pain-hazed vision, Felicity glimpsed a structure ahead, a log cabin nestled against a hillside, smoke rising from its chimney. It looked like something from a fairy tale, too perfect to be real after the nightmare of the last day. Nathan dismounted and reached up for her. As he lifted her down, her legs buckled, and he swept her up in his arms without hesitation. "I've got you." She should protest. She was a proper Boston lady, after all. But propriety seemed a distant concern as he carried her toward the cabin, her blood leaving a trail of dark drops on the dusty ground. Inside was sparse but clean, a single room with a bed, table, and kitchen area. Nathan laid her on the bed with infinite care, then immediately set about building up the fire and heating water. "The bullet's out, but I need to clean this properly," he said, gathering supplies from a chest. "It's going to hurt." "Can't hurt worse than it already does." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something raw in his expression. Pain's like that sometimes. Thinks it can't get worse. Then it finds a way. But you strike me as stronger than you know, Miss Morgan. As he worked, cleaning and rebandaging her wound with hands that were both gentle and sure, Felicity found herself studying him. There was a story written in the lines around his eyes, in the careful way he moved, in the practiced efficiency of his medical knowledge. "You've done this before," she said. War teaches a man things he'd rather not know. He didn't elaborate, but she'd heard enough about the conflict between the states to fill in the blanks. When he finished, he sat back on his heels, exhaustion showing for the first time. "You'll need rest. Few days at least before you can travel. I'll ride to town tomorrow. Let them know you're safe." "What about Blackwood's gang?" His expression hardened. "Let me worry about them." But she caught the way his hand moved unconsciously to the Colt at his hip, the way his eyes tracked to the windows. He was worried, more than he let on. "Why do I feel like you have history with them?" she asked. Nathan stood, busying himself with putting away the medical supplies. "Everyone in these parts has history with Blackwood. He's a plague on decent folks." There was more. She could sense it in his careful words. But the laudanum he'd given her for pain was pulling her under, and the questions died on her lips. "Sleep," he said, and his voice was gentler than she'd heard it yet. "You're safe here. I promise you that." As darkness claimed her, Felicity heard him settling into a chair by the door, heard the distinctive click of a rifle being checked and loaded. Her last conscious thought was that she believed him, this stranger who'd found her bleeding beneath the aspens, who'd promised she wouldn't face her pain alone. Outside, the storm broke with a vengeance, rain hammering the cabin roof like gunfire. But inside, warmed by the fire and guarded by a man who knew too much about pain, Felicity Morgan slept without dreams for the first time since leaving Boston. The world swayed in and out of focus as Nathan lifted Felicity onto his horse. The storm had passed, leaving the forest dripping and fresh. But her fever had risen during the night. She was barely conscious of his arms around her as he settled behind her in the saddle, pulling her back against his chest. "Stay with me, Miss Morgan." His voice rumbled through the fog of her delirium. "We've got some riding to do." The makeshift bandage on her thigh was soaked through again. Despite his careful tending, the cabin, while sheltered, lacked what he needed to properly treat a wound going septic. His own home, a larger cabin deeper in the mountains, had medical supplies from his army days, things that might make the difference between life and death. Felicity's head lolled against his shoulder. "The children," she mumbled. "I'm supposed to teach them letters." "You will," Nathan said firmly, urging his horse into a careful walk. Every jostle made her whimper, and each sound cut into him like a blade. "Come spring, you'll have those youngsters reading Shakespeare." "My books," she said suddenly, with the clarity that sometimes pierced fever dreams. "They burned my books, all of them. Why would they burn books?" Nathan's jaw tightened. He'd seen the remains of her trunk near the stagecoach, pages scattered like snow across the blood-stained ground. Because some men fear what they don't understand, and they don't understand much. The trail wound upward through stands of pine and fir, the air growing thinner and cooler. Nathan kept one arm firm around Felicity's waist while guiding his horse with practiced ease. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling about her life in Boston, sometimes crying out wordlessly. "My guardian," she said during one lucid moment, "always said I was too headstrong for my own good, said the frontier would eat me alive." "Your guardian was wrong." Nathan adjusted his hold as she shivered against him. "You survived what would have killed most. That's not headstrong. That's steel." "Don't feel like steel," she whispered. "Feel like glass. Broken glass." "Even broken glass can cut," he said. "Even broken glass catches the light." She was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she drifted off again. Then, "You speak like a poet, Sheriff Reed." "Just a man who's read too many books on long winter nights. A lawman who reads poetry." Despite her pain, there was a hint of smile in her voice. What would the dime novels make of that? Probably wouldn't sell many copies. The ghost of her laugh turned into a cough that racked her whole body. Nathan pulled her closer, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. The fever was climbing. He urged his horse to a faster pace, though every hoofbeat brought a soft cry of pain from her lips. The sun was directly overhead when the trees opened up to reveal his cabin, larger than the line shack where he'd first tended her. This was a proper home. 2 rooms and a loft, with a covered porch and a small barn. Smoke rising from the chimney told him his sometime housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had been by. "Almost there," he murmured, dismounting carefully. Felicity's eyes fluttered open, taking in the cabin. "Yours." "Home," he confirmed, reaching up for her. This time, when he lifted her down, she cried out in earnest, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, Nothing to apologize for." He carried her inside, her weight seeming less with each step, as if the fever was burning her away. "You're doing fine." The main room was warm and clean, with books lining one wall and a stone fireplace dominating another. Nathan laid her on his own bed, larger and more comfortable than the narrow cot at the line shack. Her skin was flushed, eyes too bright. "Pretty," she murmured, looking around. "Not what I expected from a bachelor's cabin." "My wife's doing, mostly." The words came out before he could stop them. She had opinions about proper living. Nathan busied himself gathering medical supplies from a cabinet. 3 years passed. Blackwood's gang hit a supply wagon heading to town. Sarah and our boy were riding along to visit her sister. The silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. When he turned back, Felicity's eyes were clear despite the fever, filled with a sympathy that went deeper than mere politeness. "Now I understand," she whispered. "Understand what—" "Why you looked at me like you were seeing a ghost when you found me. Why you're so determined to keep me alive." Nathan knelt beside the bed, meeting her gaze directly. "You're not her, I know that, but you're alive, and I aim to keep you that way. Not because of the past, but because it's right. Because you deserve to teach those children, to build whatever life you came west to find." She reached out, her hot fingers brushing his hand. "Tell me about her. While you work, tell me about Sarah." So he did, as he cleaned and treated her wound with carbolic acid and fresh bandages. He spoke of a woman who could make roses bloom in mountain soil, who sang while she worked and laughed at his poor attempts at poetry. He told her about little James, barely 2, who followed his father everywhere on chubby legs. "She would have liked you," he said finally, securing the last bandage. "Would have admired your courage." "I don't feel courageous. I feel scared." Felicity's voice was growing thicker as he measured out laudanum for her pain. "What if they come here?" "Then they'll find me waiting." He helped her sip the medicine. "And I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago. That man believed in justice and law. This one believes in whatever keeps innocent people safe." The laudanum worked quickly on her weakened system. As she drifted toward sleep, she mumbled, "Not broken glass after all." "What's that?" "You, not broken glass, forged iron, bent maybe, but not broken." Nathan sat back, watching her face relax into sleep. Outside, his horse whickered softly, and the wind sighed through the pines. He thought about the trail of blood leading from the stage to his cabin, about the likelihood that Blackwood's men were even now following it. Let them come, he thought. He'd failed to protect his family once. He wouldn't fail again. Through the afternoon, he kept vigil. Felicity's fever climbed and broke, like waves against a shore. She called out names. Margaret, James, which made him flinch, Catherine. She spoke of lessons and chalk and the smell of books. Once, she grabbed his hand and wouldn't let go, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't let me die here," she said clearly. "Not like this. Not without doing something that matters." "You won't," he promised. "You're going to live and teach, and probably terrorize the school board with your Boston ideas about proper education." "You don't know that." "I do." He squeezed her hand gently. "Because you're stubborn. Because you walked miles on that shot leg when anyone else would have given up. Because you're here, fighting, instead of letting go." Night fell like a curtain. Nathan lit lamps and kept the fire burning high, creating a circle of warmth and light against the darkness pressing at the windows. Felicity slept fitfully, her breathing sometimes so shallow he had to lean close to be sure she still lived. It was near midnight when she woke fully, the fever finally breaking for good. Her eyes were clear, focused on his face in the lamplight. "You stayed. Said I would." She looked around, taking in details she'd missed before. The books, the photographs on the mantel, the woman's rocking chair in the corner that he probably couldn't bear to move. "This is dangerous for you," she said. "Harboring me here. If Blackwood finds out—" "Blackwood's already taken everything that mattered to me," Nathan said quietly. "What's left is just a man who knows right from wrong, and leaving you to die would be wrong. Even if it costs you." Especially then, Sarah always said the measure of a man wasn't in the easy choices. Felicity was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the dancing firelight. "I think she was right. I think she chose well." Something passed between them in the darkness. Not attraction, not yet, but understanding. Two people marked by loss, finding themselves on the same path through no choice of their own. "Rest," Nathan said finally. "Tomorrow we'll see about getting you strong enough to scandalize Whispering Pines with your Eastern sensibilities." "And if Blackwood comes?" Then he'll learn what a man with nothing left to lose is capable of. As Felicity drifted back to sleep, her breathing deep and even for the first time since he'd found her, Nathan returned to his vigil by the window. The night was vast and full of threats, but inside the cabin, in the circle of lamplight, something fragile and precious was taking root. Not love, it was too soon for that, the wounds too fresh on both sides, but perhaps the possibility of it, like seeds waiting beneath snow for spring to come. And Nathan Reed, who had thought his life over the day he buried his family, found himself hoping for spring. The morning sun slanted through the cabin window, illuminating dust motes that danced above the rough-hewn table. Nathan had already prepared everything, clean cloths boiled and laid out, his old army medical kit open to reveal instruments that gleamed with terrible purpose. The bottle of whiskey stood beside them, both antiseptic and the only pain relief he could offer. Felicity sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale but determined. The fever had broken, but the wound was worse, angry red streaks spreading from the bullet hole like poisonous vines beneath her skin. "The ball left fragments," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was about to do. "Metal, cloth, maybe bone chips. They need to come out, or I'll die." She finished the sentence with remarkable calm. "I understand." He knelt before her, meeting her eyes. "I won't lie to you. This will be the worst pain you've ever known. I have no ether, no morphine, just whiskey and laudanum, and not enough of either to truly help." "You've done this before, during the war." "Yes, but never—" He paused, searching for words. "Never on someone who mattered." The admission hung between them, unexpected and raw. Felicity reached out, touching his face with gentle fingers. "I trust you." "I need you to understand something else." His jaw tightened. "You'll want to move, to fight. It's natural, but you can't. Any sudden movement while I'm working could cause more damage." "How do I stay still through something like that?" Nathan stood, crossing to a chest in the corner. He returned with the leather straps, soft with age and use. "These will help, and—" He hesitated, then pulled a piece of carved wood from his pocket. "Bite down on this when it gets bad. Saved many a soldier's tongue." Felicity took the wood, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "You carved this?" Long winters, idle hands. He began securing the straps around her arms and good leg, each movement careful and clinical. "If you need to scream, scream. No shame in it. This cabin's heard worse." "From you." The question was soft, but he heard the deeper meaning. "Some nights." He finished with the straps and handed her the whiskey bottle. "Drink. Much as you can stomach." She took several long swallows, coughing at the burn. "Boston society would be appalled." "Boston society never took a bullet for their troubles." He watched her drink more, waiting for the telltale flush that said the alcohol was taking effect. "Tell me about Boston, about your life there." As he cleaned his instruments one final time, she spoke of brownstone houses and gas lamps, of teaching piano to proper young ladies who giggled behind their fans. She told him about the guardian who'd taken her in after her parents died of fever, about the expectations and restrictions that had finally driven her west. "I wanted to matter," she said, the whiskey slurring her words slightly. "Wanted to do more than pour tea and discuss weather. The advertisement for a teacher here, it seemed like fate." "Still might be." Nathan positioned himself, scalpel in hand. "Just a different path than you expected." She lay back as he directed. Gripping the edges of the table, the carved wood went between her teeth. Their eyes met one last time. "Ready?" She nodded. The first cut drew a muffled scream that tore through Nathan like shrapnel. He forced his hands to remain steady, to follow the path of infection to its source. Blood welled, and Felicity's body went rigid against the restraints. "I know," he murmured, working quickly but carefully. "I know it hurts. You're doing so well." Sarah was a teacher too. Did I tell you that taught me to read better, to write more than my own name? Said every person deserved words, deserved stories. He kept talking, nonsense mostly, just giving her something to focus on besides the agony. The probe went deeper, searching for foreign matter. Felicity's breathing came in sharp pants around the wood, tears streaming down her face. There. Metal scraped against metal as he found the first fragment. Got one. Her scream, even muffled, echoed off the cabin walls. Nathan's own forehead beaded with sweat as he extracted a piece of lead the size of a pea. Blood flowed freely now, and he packed the wound quickly before going back in. You know what Sarah used to say about pain? He located another fragment, steel himself for her reaction as he removed it. Said it was just life reminding us we're alive. Said the real tragedy was feeling nothing at all. Felicity's fingers had found his free hand somehow, gripping with desperate strength. He let her, using his other hand to work. Another piece of metal? Then what looked like cloth fiber. Then, worst of all, a bone fragment that made her whole body convulse. Almost done. He lied. There was more. He could feel it. But she was weakening, her grip loosening. Stay with me, Felicity. You hear me. You stay right here. Her eyes had rolled back, showing white. Nathan worked faster now, racing against shock and blood loss. 2 more fragments, then clean tissue at last. He irrigated the wound with the remaining whiskey, drawing one final, weak cry. Done. It's done. He packed and bandaged with practiced efficiency, then moved to release the straps. Felicity was unconscious but breathing, her pulse rapid but steady. You did it. Bravest thing I've ever seen. He lifted her carefully, carrying her to the bed. The surgical site was clean now, already looking better despite the trauma. He covered her with quilts, then sat heavily in the bedside chair. His hands shook now that it was over. He'd done similar procedures dozens of times during the war. But this was different. This mattered in a way that terrified him. Somewhere in the last 3 days, this woman from Boston had become important. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new, something he wasn't sure he was ready for. Felicity stirred, eyes fluttering open. The carved wood had fallen from her mouth, and her voice was hoarse. Did you get it all? Every piece. Good. She managed a weak smile. Would hate to go through that twice. You won't have to. He leaned forward, brushing damp hair from her forehead. Rest now. The hard part's over. Is it? Her eyes, still bright with pain, saw too much. Feels like something's just beginning. Nathan had no answer for that. He gave her laudanum for the pain and watched her slip into healing sleep. Outside, afternoon shadows lengthened across the mountain meadow. Soon he'd need to ride to town, report the attack, start the machinery of law and justice turning. But not yet. For now, he sat beside a brave woman from Boston who'd trusted him with her life, and wondered if he was strong enough to trust her with whatever came next. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. In the dying light, Nathan allowed himself to hope, not for a return of what he'd lost, but for something new, something forged in pain but tempered by courage. He reached out, taking Felicity's hand gently in his. She squeezed back in her sleep, holding on. They stayed that way as darkness fell. 2 damaged souls finding anchor in each other against the storm that was surely coming. Because men like Blackwood didn't leave survivors. And, sooner or later, he'd come to finish what he'd started. But that was tomorrow's worry. Tonight, there was only the quiet breathing of a woman who'd survived the unsurvivable, and a man learning that his heart, scarred as it was, still knew how to beat. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wall, and Nathan Reed, who'd thought himself beyond redemption, whispered a prayer of thanks for unexpected blessings and the courage of Eastern schoolteachers who didn't know when to quit. The evening wind carried the scent of pine and approaching snow as Felicity sat on the porch, her injured leg propped on a wooden crate, 2 weeks had passed since Nathan had cut the infection from her body, and though she still limped, the wound was healing clean. She watched him split wood in the fading light, noting the economical grace of his movements, the way his shoulders tensed just before the axe fell. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "Observing," she corrected, pulling the borrowed shawl tighter. "In Boston, we called it taking the air. In Montana, we call it getting cold for no good reason." But there was warmth in his voice as he set another log on the block. "You should be inside." "I've been inside for days. I need to see something besides walls." She paused, gathering courage. "Tell me about that night. The night your family died." The axe stopped mid-swing. Nathan lowered it slowly, his back still to her. "Why?" "Because carrying it alone is killing you. Because I hear you pacing at night. Because—" She took a breath. "Because I've told you about everyone I lost. And sharing it helped. Let me do the same for you." He was silent so long she thought he'd refuse. Then he set the axe aside and climbed the porch steps, settling into the chair beside hers. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky the color of old blood. "March 15th, 3 years passed," he began, voice flat. "Sarah wanted to visit her sister in Cedar Falls. New baby, first nephew. I was supposed to go, but Tom Hendricks had gotten himself shot in a bar fight, and I was the only law for 50 miles. He stared at his hands. I told her to wait. She said the weather was turning. Might not get another chance before spring melt made the roads impassable." Felicity remained silent, knowing the weight of words unspoken. "She took James and joined the Murphy freight wagon, safer than traveling alone. I thought—" His laugh was bitter. "Blackwood hit them at Devil's Canyon. Killed everyone, drivers, guards, passengers. Took what they wanted and burned the rest." "How did you find out?" His knuckles were white where he gripped the chair arms. "I got worried when they didn't arrive. Rode out looking, found the wagon still smoldering. Sarah was—" He stopped, jaw working. "She tried to shield James, died covering him. Didn't matter in the end." The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief. Finally, Felicity reached over, covering his clenched fist with her hand. "It wasn't your fault." "I should have been there." "Then you'd be dead too. Maybe that would have been better." The words came out raw, stripped of pretense. "I hunted them for months. Killed 2 of Blackwood's men in fair fights. Would have killed more. But the marshal reminded me I wore a badge. Had to choose between law and vengeance." "You chose law." "I chose emptiness." He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. "Until I found a stubborn schoolteacher bleeding under an aspen tree." Felicity felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. "I'm not her. Nathan, I can't replace—" "I know." His grip tightened. "That's not what this is. Sarah's gone, and that hole in my chest won't ever fill. But maybe there's room for something else, something new." "Is that why you've been teaching me to shoot?" She gestured to the Colt .45 he'd been drilling her with each morning. "Because of something new? Because Blackwood's still out there? Because he doesn't leave witnesses?" Nathan's expression hardened. "Because I won't lose anyone else to him." "You think he'll come?" "I know he will. Question is when." He stood abruptly, pacing to the porch rail. "Should send you to Denver. Put you on a train back east where it's safe." "No?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "I didn't survive that attack just to run. I didn't come west to hide." "This isn't about courage. Felicity, it's about staying alive." She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the protest from her leg. "You think I don't know that you think I don't wake up hearing those screams, smelling the smoke?" She limped to stand beside him. "But I also know running won't change what happened. Won't bring back Mr. Pemberton or Mrs. Chatterley or any of the others." "What will staying do?" "Give me a chance to look Blackwood in the eye, to testify against him, to see justice done." She touched his arm. To help you end this. Nathan turned to study her face in the dying light. You don't know what you're asking. Don't I? She met his gaze steadily. I've lost everyone who mattered to me. Parents, guardian, friends on that stage. But I'm still here, still breathing. That has to mean something. Sarah said something similar once. Said surviving meant you had a duty to live double for yourself and for those who couldn't. His voice roughened. Never understood it until now. The first stars were emerging, cold and distant. Inside the cabin, the fire needed tending, supper needed cooking. But neither moved, caught in a moment balanced between past and future. Teach me, Felicity said finally. Not just to shoot. Teach me to survive here, to fight if needed, to be more than a liability. You're not. I am, and we both know it. I can barely ride, can't track, can't tell poisonous berries from safe ones. In Boston, I was accomplished. Here, I'm helpless. She straightened her shoulders. I won't be helpless anymore. Nathan was quiet, studying her with those winter sky eyes. It won't be easy. This land doesn't forgive mistakes. Neither does Blackwood. No, he agreed. He doesn't. A wolf howled in the distance, answered by another. The sound raised goosebumps on Felicity's arms, but she didn't retreat. This was her world now. Wolves and outlaws, mountains and endless sky. No gaslight or proper parlors, just survival and whatever grace they could carve from wilderness. We'll start tomorrow, Nathan said finally. Riding first, can't fight if you can't stay on a horse. Then tracking, reading sign. Winter's coming, so we'll work on cold weather survival. And Blackwood, marshals due through next week. We'll make a report, official-like. Get wanted posters updated with your testimony. He paused. Might draw him out. You want to use me as bait? No. The denial was immediate, fierce. But he'll come regardless. Better to be ready than caught off guard. Felicity nodded, understanding the logic even as her stomach clenched. Then we'll be ready. Nathan turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Why does this matter so much to you? Could still go back east, start over where it's safe. She considered the question, searching for words to explain what she barely understood herself. Because something broke in me that day. Not just my body, something deeper, and I think the only way to heal it is to face what broke it. Or die trying. Then at least I'll die as myself, not some frightened shadow. She managed a slight smile. Besides, someone needs to teach those children proper grammar. Might as well be me. Stubborn woman. So I've been told. They stood together as full darkness claimed the mountains. Two souls marked by violence, but refusing to be defined by it. Tomorrow would bring lessons in survival, in the harsh mathematics of frontier life. But tonight, there was just the quiet understanding between them. Not quite love, but something that might grow into it given time and care. Come inside, Nathan said finally. Stew won't cook itself. Felicity followed him, her limp barely noticeable. At the doorway, she paused. Nathan, thank you for saving me, for giving me a chance to save myself. He stopped, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from within. We saved each other. I think just took me longer to realize I needed it. Inside, the cabin felt like home in a way her Boston rooms never had. As Nathan ladled stew and Felicity sliced bread, she allowed herself to imagine a future teaching children, building a life, perhaps even finding love with a man who understood that scars could be beautiful if you learned to see them right. Outside, the wolves howled again, and somewhere in the darkness, Jake Blackwood was planning his next move. But inside the cabin, there was warmth and light and the beginning of something worth fighting for. And that, Felicity thought as she watched Nathan across the table, was enough reason to stay. Marshal William Thornton was a man carved from leather and gun smoke, with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He sat at Nathan's table, coffee cooling in his cup as he studied the woman across from him. Felicity met his gaze without flinching, her own steel showing through. "You're certain it was Blackwood himself?" Thornton asked for the third time. Black hat with silver conchos, scar from his left ear to his jaw, rode a paint horse with one white sock. Felicity's voice remained steady. "He was the one giving orders. Called one of his men Cooper, another one Joaquin." Nathan stood by the window, tension radiating from his shoulders. 3 weeks of training had hardened Felicity in ways Boston never could have, but she was still no match for seasoned killers. "That's them," Thornton confirmed. "Cooper's wanted in 3 territories. Joaquin rode with Bloody Bill Anderson during the war." He leaned back, chair creaking. "Miss Morgan, you're the first witness to survive a Blackwood attack in over a year. That makes you valuable." "And a target," Nathan added. "That too." Thornton pulled a rolled document from his coat. "Which is why I'm deputizing you both. Federal authority. Means you can pursue Blackwood across territorial lines." Felicity blinked. "I'm not a lawman." "You are now." Thornton slid the papers across. "Special appointment. Happens sometimes when we need witnesses protected. Gives you legal authority to defend yourself." "What he's not saying," Nathan interjected, "is it also makes you legally responsible for helping bring Blackwood in." "The choice is yours." Thornton said, "But with or without a badge, they'll come for you. Least this way. You can fight back official-like." Felicity picked up the pen without hesitation. "Where do I sign?" As she wrote her name in careful script, Thornton studied Nathan. "You've changed. Read. Time was, you'd have charged off alone seeking vengeance. Time was, I had nothing left to protect." The marshal's weathered face softened slightly. "Sarah would be glad you found a reason to live again." "We're not," Nathan started. "I know what you're not. Question is, do you—" Thornton stood, gathering his papers. "Got word Blackwood's been seen near Silver Creek, probably planning to hit the mine payroll. 3 days ride north." "That's rough country," Nathan said. "If they hole up in those canyons, which is why I'm gathering men. Meet us in Cedar Falls day after tomorrow. We'll ride together." He touched his hat to Felicity. "Ma'am, welcome to the law business. Try not to die your first week." After he left, silence filled the cabin. Felicity stood slowly, testing her leg. The wound barely pulled anymore, just a persistent ache that reminded her of how close she'd come to death. "You didn't have to sign," Nathan said quietly. "Yes, I did." She moved to the gun cabinet, taking down the Winchester he'd been teaching her with. "Show me again how to clean this. If we're riding into battle, I want everything perfect." They worked side by side, breaking down weapons, cleaning, oiling, reassembling. Nathan watched her hands, steady now where they'd trembled that first week. "You've been practicing," he observed. "Every morning while you do chores." She sighted down the rifle barrel. "Mrs. Chen's been helping. Says her husband taught her to shoot when they first came to Montana." "Smart man." Nathan loaded cartridges into his belt. "Felicity, there's something else. If we face Blackwood, I might not be able to stay legal. Not when I see him." She set the rifle aside, turning to face him. "I know. I killed 2 of his men before. Fair fights, but barely. If I see him again, after what he did," his hands clenched, "I'm asking you to stop me. If I cross that line, I need you to pull me back." "Why me?" "Because you're the only thing that's mattered to me in 3 years." The admission hung between them like a physical thing. "Because somewhere between cutting bullets out of your leg and teaching you to shoot, you became my reason to try living again instead of just surviving." Felicity's breath caught. These past weeks, she'd felt it too. The growing connection, the way their eyes met across the cabin, the careful distance they maintained that spoke of feelings neither was ready to voice. "Nathan, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Not yet. We both have ghosts to put to rest first. But after this is over, if we both survive— He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. I'd like to court you proper, take you to dances, sit with you at church. All the things Sarah and I never got to do because we were young and impatient. I'd like that, she whispered. But you're right. Ghosts first. He reached up, fingertips barely grazing her cheek. Stay behind me when the fighting starts. Please, I know you're brave. I know you can shoot now. But you've already lost one woman to Blackwood. She covered his hand with hers. I'll be careful, but I won't hide. Not anymore. The next morning came too soon. They rode out before dawn. Felicity on the gentle mare Nathan had been training her with. Her leg protested the long ride ahead, but she'd wrapped it tight and taken willow bark tea for the pain. The Henry rifle rested in her saddle scabbard, the Colt .45 heavy on her hip. Remember what I taught you, Nathan said as they picked their way down the mountain trail. Stay calm. Aim center mass. Squeeze, don't pull. And if they get close? Then you use this. He handed her a skinning knife in a beaded sheath. Sometimes a blade is better than a bullet. They made Cedar Falls by nightfall, where Thornton had gathered 8 men, a mix of deputies, soldiers, and volunteers with their own reasons for wanting Blackwood dead. Felicity was the only woman, drawing curious and skeptical looks. This ain't no place for a lady, one grizzled deputy muttered. Good thing I'm a federal officer then, Felicity replied coolly, touching the badge pinned inside her coat. Nathan hid a smile as the deputy subsided, properly chastised. They made camp outside town, planning to ride at first light. Felicity sat apart, checking her weapons one final time. The other men shared stories of past fights, of men killed and battles won. She had only one story, of survival and the stubborn refusal to be a victim again. Scared? Nathan asked, settling beside her. Terrified, she admitted. But also ready. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. He pulled something from his pocket, a small leather pouch. This was Sarah's. Carried it for luck. Want you to have it? Inside was a worn silver locket, a pressed wildflower, and a river stone polished smooth. Tokens of a life lived, a love lost. I can't take this. You can. She'd want it carried by someone brave, someone who understands that living through loss is its own kind of courage. He closed her fingers around the pouch. Besides, I've got my own lucky charm now. What's that? A stubborn schoolteacher who refuses to die. His smile was soft in the firelight. Best luck I've had in years. Around them, the camp settled into sleep. Tomorrow they'd ride toward violence, toward a reckoning 3 years in the making. But tonight, sitting close enough to share warmth, they had this moment of peace. Tell me about after, Felicity said. When this is over, tell me about the life we might have. So Nathan did, painting pictures of Sunday dinners and school plays, of quiet evenings reading by the fire and spring mornings working the garden. He spoke of ordinary things made precious by their possibility, of a future neither had dared imagine until now. And Felicity listened, the leather pouch warm in her hand, letting his words build a bridge across the darkness to a tomorrow worth fighting for, worth surviving for, worth living for. When the first stars appeared, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she'd see this through. Not for vengeance, though that pulled at her too, but for the chance at the life Nathan described, for the children she'd teach, for the love that might bloom if they gave it time and tenderness. The ghosts could wait one more day. Tonight, she was just a woman falling in love with a good man, preparing to face the darkness so they could find their way to the light. The abandoned silver mine squatted against the mountainside like a wound in the earth, its entrance a dark mouth waiting to swallow the unwary. Dawn light barely touched the canyon walls as Thornton's men took positions among the rocks and scrub pine. Felicity pressed herself against a boulder. Henry, rifle steady in her hands, watching Nathan move into position 30 yards to her left. 3 days of hard riding had brought them here, following trails of blood and rumor. The mine payroll had been hit as expected. 2 guards dead, but Blackwood had made a mistake. One of his men had been wounded, leaving a trail even a greenhorn could follow. "Remember," Thornton had said before they spread out, "we take them alive if possible, dead if necessary." Felicity saw Nathan's jaw tighten at those words. Alive meant trial, meant the slow wheels of justice. Dead meant certainty. A whistle, barely audible, like a bird's morning call. The signal, movement in the mine entrance. Felicity's hand steadied on the rifle as she counted shadows emerging into gray dawn light. 4, 5, 6 men. Where was? Well, well. The voice came from behind, cold as winter iron. "If it ain't the schoolmarm who got away." Felicity's blood froze. She turned slowly, finding herself staring into Jake Blackwood's scarred face. His pistol was already drawn, aimed at her chest. "Should have stayed in Boston, girl." His smile was all teeth and malice. "Drop the rifle. Slow like." She let the Henry fall, calculating distances. Her hand inched toward the Colt at her hip. Ah. Blackwood stepped closer. "Heard Reed's been teaching you to shoot, but you ain't fast enough, not by half." Gunfire erupted from the mine entrance. The ambush sprung too early. Blackwood's head turned for just an instant, and Felicity dove sideways, rolling behind a fallen log as his shot split the air where she'd been. "Nathan!" she screamed, fumbling for her pistol. More shots, shouts, the chaos of battle. Felicity pressed herself flat as bullets chewed splinters from the log. She could hear Thornton bellowing orders, hear the Winchester's distinctive crack that meant Nathan was still fighting. "Come out, schoolmarm." Blackwood's voice was closer now. "You're just postponing the inevitable." Felicity gripped the Colt. Sarah's leather pouch pressed against her ribs where she'd tucked it inside her shirt. One chance. She could hear Blackwood's boots on gravel, circling toward the log's far end. Wait, Nathan had taught her. Let them come to you. A shadow fell across her. She rolled onto her back, gun rising, and fired twice into Blackwood's silhouette. He cursed, stumbling backward, but didn't fall. Her bullets had caught his shoulder, spinning him but not stopping him. "Now I'm angry," he snarled, raising his gun. The shot that saved her life came from her left. Nathan, emerging from cover like an avenging angel. His bullet caught Blackwood in the chest, driving him to his knees. "Get away from her." Nathan's voice was death itself. Blackwood laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "There's the Nathan Reed I remember, the one who killed 2 of my boys." He swayed but kept his gun up. "Your woman's got spine. I'll give her that, just like your Sarah did." Nathan went very still. "What did you say?" "Didn't know it was your family in that wagon until after." Blackwood's grin was red-tinged. But she fought hard, tried to protect the boy, took Cooper 2 shots to... Nathan's gun roared, and Blackwood's words died with him, his body toppling backward into the dust. "Nathan, no!" Felicity scrambled to her feet, but it was done. He stood over Blackwood's body, gun still raised, trembling with rage and old grief. Around them, the battle was ending. Thornton's men had taken the mine entrance, the surviving outlaws surrendering or dying. "He was down," Thornton said quietly, appearing at Nathan's shoulder. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Nathan's voice was hollow. "He killed them. Bill looked me in the eye and told me how my wife died." Felicity moved to his side, gently pushing his gun arm down. "It's over now." "Is it?" He looked at her with haunted eyes. "I just killed an unarmed man, badge or no badge. That's murder." "That's justice," she said firmly. "He was about to shoot. I saw it. We all saw it." She looked at Thornton meaningfully. The marshal studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Blackwood went for his gun. Clean shoot. That's what my report will say. The other deputies were bringing out prisoners, wounded outlaws who'd survived to see trial. Cooper was among them, clutching a bleeding arm and glaring hatred at anyone who met his eyes. "Jake's dead." Cooper spat blood. "You killed him." "He killed himself," Nathan said quietly. 3 years ago, when he murdered my family. Just took this long to stop breathing. Felicity stayed close as they dealt with the aftermath. Bodies to bury, prisoners to secure, evidence to gather. She watched Nathan carefully, saw the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking, saw the grief and relief warring in his expression. As the sun climbed higher, painting the canyon walls gold, she found him sitting alone on a rock outcropping, staring at nothing. "I thought it would feel different," he said as she approached. "Thought killing him would fix something, make the pain stop." "Does it?" "No." He looked at her, and she saw tears he'd probably been holding back for years. "Just makes it final. They're still gone, and now he is too, and I'm still here trying to figure out what comes next." Felicity sat beside him, not touching, just present. What comes next is living, really living, not just surviving. It's teaching and learning and building something new. She paused. "It's deciding that the best revenge against men like Blackwood is refusing to let them steal your future along with your past. Is that what you've decided?" "It's what I'm trying to decide." She touched her leg where the bullet scar would always remind her. "Some days are easier than others." Nathan reached over, taking her hand. "I meant what I said before, about courting you proper when this was over." "I know. But I need time to figure out who I am without the hate, to learn how to be something more than just a man hunting ghosts." "I need time too," she admitted, "to learn who I am in this place, to prove to myself that I belong here because I choose it, not because I'm running from something." They sat in silence as the recovery operation continued around them. By noon, they were ready to ride, prisoners secured, evidence packed, the mine once again abandoned to darkness and memory. As they mounted up, Thornton pulled Nathan aside. "My report's going to be clean, like I said, but Nathan, this has to be the end of it. You got your justice. Now you need to find your peace." "I know." Nathan looked at Felicity, already mounted and waiting. "I think I know where to start looking." The ride back was subdued, victory mixed with exhaustion and the complex emotions that come after violence. Felicity rode beside Nathan, not speaking much but steady in her presence. When they camped that night, she sat with him by the fire while the others celebrated the end of Blackwood's reign of terror. "Tell me about Sarah," she said quietly. "Not how she died. Tell me how she lived." So he did, and for the first time in 3 years, the memories brought more smiles than tears. He talked until the fire burned low, painting a picture of a woman who had loved deeply and lived fully, who would have wanted him to do the same. When he finally fell silent, Felicity squeezed his hand. "She sounds wonderful." "She was." He looked at her across the dying flames. "I think she would have liked you. Would have been glad I found you. Even though I'm a stubborn schoolmarm from Boston. Especially then." His smile was tired but real. "Sarah always said I needed someone to challenge me, keep me from getting too set in my ways." They reached Whispering Pines 2 days later to find the town in an uproar of celebration. Word had already spread. Blackwood was dead, his gang scattered, the territory safe again. People poured out of buildings to cheer, and Felicity found herself overwhelmed by gratitude from townspeople who'd lost friends and family to the outlaws. "You'll start teaching next week?" asked Mrs. Patterson, president of the school board. "The children are so eager to meet you." "Yes," Felicity said, surprising herself with a certainty in her voice. "I'll be ready." Nathan watched from across the street, talking with the mayor and other town leaders. Their eyes met over the crowd, and something passed between them. Not a promise. Not yet, but the possibility of one. The ghosts weren't gone, might never be entirely, but they were quieter now, making room for whatever came next. And as Felicity stood in the dusty street of a frontier town, badge still pinned inside her coat, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. The past was written in blood and loss, but the future was still a blank page, waiting to be filled with whatever story they chose to write. The doctor's office smelled of carbolic acid and fear. Felicity paced the narrow waiting room, her boots clicking against worn floorboards in a rhythm that matched her racing heart. Through the thin walls, she could hear Dr. Morrison's low murmur and, worse, Nathan's labored breathing. It had happened so fast. The final confrontation with Blackwood's remaining men at the mine. Nathan shielding her as bullets flew, the wet sound as one found its mark just below his ribs. He'd stayed on his feet long enough to see the last outlaw fall, then collapsed into her arms, blood spreading dark across his shirt. "You promised," she'd whispered as they loaded him into the wagon. "You promised we'd have time." Now, 8 hours later, she wore his blood on her dress like an accusation. Marshal Thornton sat in the corner, hat in his hands, looking every one of his 60 years. "He's strong," Thornton offered. "Seen men survive worse." But Felicity heard the doubt beneath the reassurance. She'd seen Nathan's face drain of color, felt his grip weaken as she held his hand during the agonizing ride to town. The doctor had taken one look and ushered him straight to surgery, leaving her to wait and bargain with a god she'd half forgotten in Boston's comfortable churches. The door opened. "Doctor." Morrison emerged, sleeves rolled up, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Felicity was moving before he could speak. "He's alive," Morrison said quickly. "But it's grave. Miss Morgan, the bullet did considerable damage. I've done what I can, but—" He spread his hands. "The next 24 hours will tell. He's asking for you." Felicity pushed past him into the makeshift surgery. Nathan lay still as death on the narrow table, bandages wrapped around his torso, skin pale as winter morning. But his eyes opened when she approached, focusing with visible effort. "Hey there, schoolmarm." His voice was thread-thin. "Don't you dare!" She grabbed his hand, holding tight. "Don't you dare leave me now! Not when we're so close to that life you painted for me." "Felicity," he squeezed back weakly. "Need you to know, these weeks with you, worth everything." "Stop talking like you're saying goodbye." Tears ran freely down her face. "You're too stubborn to die. Nathan Reed, too stubborn and too needed. This town needs you. Those children need their sheriff to keep them safe. I need you." "Do you?" A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. "Boston lady like you could have anyone?" "I don't want anyone. I want the man who found me bleeding under an aspen tree and refused to let me die. The man who taught me to shoot and ride and survive. The man who—" Her voice broke. "The man I love, though I've been too scared to say it." His eyes widened slightly. "Felicity." "No, let me finish." She leaned closer, speaking directly into his ear. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You showed me I could be strong without being hard, that surviving wasn't the same as living. You made me believe I could build something here, be something more than a grieving woman running from shadows." "You did that yourself." "Maybe, but you held the light while I found my way." She pressed his hand to her cheek. "So you hold on. Nathan Reed, you hold on through the pain and the darkness, because I'll be right here, every minute, every hour, for as long as it takes." "Doctor," Morrison cleared his throat. "He needs rest. Miss Morgan." "Then I'll rest with him." Her tone brooked no argument. "I'm not leaving." The doctor looked to Thornton, who shrugged. "Wouldn't try to move her if I were you. Doc, woman who faced down Blackwood's gang, won't be deterred by medical protocol." So they moved Nathan to the small recovery room, And Felicity took up her vigil. She bathed his fevered face, held water to his lips when he could drink, and talked. She told him about her childhood in Boston, about the books she'd loved and the dreams she'd harbored. She recited poetry from memory, Wordsworth and Byron and Whitman, filling the silence with beauty. When his fever spiked near midnight, she told him about the life she saw for them. "A house on the edge of town," she murmured. "Close enough to walk to school, but far enough for privacy. A garden where Sarah's roses can bloom alongside my Eastern flowers. Sunday dinners with friends. Christmas pageants where you pretend not to cry at the children singing." His breathing hitched, and she gripped his hand tighter. "Children of our own someday. A little girl with your eyes and my stubbornness. A boy who follows you around with a toy badge, learning what real courage looks like." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Growing old together. Nathan, sitting on the porch watching sunsets, knowing we earned every moment of peace." "Pretty picture," he managed, eyes fluttering open. "It's not just a picture, it's a promise." She kissed his forehead, tasting salt and fever. "But you have to stay. You have to fight." The hours crawled by. Dr. Morrison came and went, checking wounds, administering what medicines he had. Thornton brought food Felicity couldn't eat, coffee she drank without tasting. The town priest stopped by, but she sent him away. "He doesn't need last rites," she said firmly. "He needs people to believe he'll live." Dawn came gray and uncertain. Nathan's fever had broken, but his breathing was shallow, pulse thready. Felicity had run out of words, could only hold his hand and will her strength into him. "I never told you," she said suddenly, "about the moment I knew I loved you. It wasn't during some dramatic scene, not when you saved me or when we faced Blackwood. It was that morning you were teaching me to make coffee over a campfire. You were so patient, even though I burned it twice. And you laughed, really laughed, for the first time since I'd met you. That's when I knew." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I love your laugh, Nathan. I love your terrible jokes and the way you hum when you think no one's listening. I love how you talk to your horse like he understands every word. I love you too." The words were barely breath, but they stopped her heart. His eyes were open, focused, more alert than they'd been in hours. "Nathan?" "Not going anywhere." Each word cost him, but determination flickered in his gaze. "Too much to live for." Dr. Morrison, summoned by Felicity's cry, checked him over with growing amazement. "The crisis has passed. He's not out of danger yet, but..." He shook his head. "In 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a will to survive." "He had help," Thornton said from the doorway, smiling at Felicity. "Some folks are just too stubborn to let go of each other." The next days blurred together. Nathan improved slowly, each small victory, sitting up, taking solid food, arguing about staying in bed, celebrated like a miracle. Felicity barely left his side, reading to him from books misses. Patterson brought playing checkers when he was alert enough, simply sitting with him when he slept. "You need to go home," he said on the 4th day. "Get some real rest. Change clothes." "I'm not leaving until you can leave with me." "Stubborn woman." "You love that about me." "I do." His hand found hers, stronger now. "But Felicity, when I get out of here, I want to do this right. Court you proper, like I promised. No more rushing because we think time's running out." "We have time," she agreed. "All the time in the world." A week later, Nathan took his first steps, leaning heavily on Felicity but upright. 2 weeks, and he was arguing with Morrison about going home. 3 weeks, and they finally released him, with strict instructions about limited activity. Felicity drove the wagon, Nathan beside her wrapped in blankets despite his protests. As they pulled up to his cabin, she saw he'd been busy before the last raid. The porch had been repaired, fresh lumber stacked for expansion. "Were you planning something?" she asked. "Maybe." He smiled, tired but real. Man's gotta have hope. She helped him inside, settled him in his chair by the fire. The cabin felt different now, not like a shrine to the past, but a place where future might take root. Sarah's picture still held place of honor on the mantel, but somehow it seemed like a blessing rather than a ghost. "Thank you," Nathan said as she tucked a quilt around him, "for staying, for pulling me back when I was ready to let go. That's what you do for the people you love." She kissed his forehead gently. "You stay." Outside, early snow dusted the mountains, but inside was warmth and light, and the quiet contentment of two people who'd faced the darkness and chosen each other. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Nathan would bear scars both visible and hidden, and Felicity still woke some nights hearing gunshots. But they'd face it together, building that life she'd whispered about in the desperate hours when death seemed certain. Because sometimes love wasn't about perfect moments or grand gestures. Sometimes it was just refusing to let go, even when letting go seemed like the only option left. And as Felicity made tea in the kitchen, she was already thinking of as hers, listening to Nathan's steady breathing from the next room. She knew that everything they'd survived had led them here, to this cabin, this moment, this chance at the life they'd almost lost before it began. The morning sun painted the mountain peaks gold as Nathan Reed stood on his porch, breathing in air that no longer hurt his healing ribs. 6 weeks had passed since Felicity had held vigil over him, whispering him back from the edge of death. 6 weeks of recovery, of careful steps and deeper healing than just flesh and bone. "You're up early." Felicity emerged from the cabin, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd been staying in town, maintaining propriety while visiting daily, but Nathan could see the question in her eyes each evening when she left. "Couldn't sleep." He accepted the coffee gratefully, their fingers brushing in a way that sent warmth through him. "Keep thinking about something." "What's that?" Instead of answering directly, Nathan set down his cup and reached into his pocket. His movements were careful. "Doctor." Morrison had cleared him for normal activity, but sudden motion still pulled at tender scar tissue. What he drew out made Felicity's breath catch. It was a ring, simple silver set with a small sapphire that caught the morning light. Not new. The metal showed the patina of age. The setting spoke of craftsmanship from an earlier time. "This was my mother's," Nathan said quietly. "Brought it with her from Tennessee when she and Pa came west. She gave it to me before she died. Said to save it for a woman who could see past the surface of things to what lay beneath." Felicity stood very still, coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. "I know we said we'd take time," Nathan continued. "Court proper and slow, but nearly dying has a way of clarifying what matters. And what matters is that I love you, Felicity Morgan, not because you saved me, not because we survived Blackwood together, but because you're the strongest, bravest, most stubborn woman I've ever known." He shifted, lowering himself carefully to one knee. The movement pulled at his wound, but he ignored it. "You came west looking for purpose, for a life that mattered. I'm asking you to build that life with me, to wake up beside me every morning and know that whatever the day brings, we'll face it together." "Nathan," her voice was barely a whisper, "marry me, Felicity. Not someday, not after some arbitrary amount of proper courting. Soon, because we've already wasted enough time on almosts and maybes." She set down her coffee with shaking hands, then surprised him by laughing. Not mockery, but joy bubbling up like spring water. "You impossible man, I've been trying to be patient, to give you space to heal, to not push too fast, and here you are. Is that a yes?" She knelt beside him, framing his face with her hands. "That's a yes to everything, to marriage, to building a life, to raising children who'll probably inherit your stubbornness and my tendency to argue with authority." "Lord help us all," Nathan murmured, then kissed her. It was different from the careful touches they'd shared during his recovery. This was promise and passion, acknowledgement of desire too long denied. When they finally parted, both breathing hard. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. "It fits," she marveled. "Ma always said it would fit the right woman when the time came." He struggled back to his feet, pulling her up with him. "How soon is too soon for a wedding?" "In Boston, 6 months minimum to plan a proper society event." "This isn't Boston." "No," she agreed, smiling. "It certainly isn't. 2 weeks, that gives me time to send for a dress from Denver. Gives you time to finish healing." 2 weeks. He pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "Mrs. Chen will be beside herself with joy. She's been dropping hints since the day I brought you here." They spent the morning making plans, interrupted frequently by kisses and laughter. The wedding would be simple. The small church in Whispering Pines. Marshall Thornton standing as Nathan's best man. Mrs. Patterson as Felicity's matron of honor. No fancy reception. Just cake and dancing at the town hall. "I need to tell you something," Felicity said as they sat together on the porch swing Nathan had installed during his recovery. "About my inheritance." Nathan raised an eyebrow. She'd mentioned a guardian in Boston, but never elaborated on her circumstances. "My guardian was wealthy, very wealthy. When he died, he left me enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life." She watched his face carefully. "I didn't mention it before because I wanted to prove I could survive here on my own merits, not money." "And you have." "But now we're to be married, and you should know, there's enough to expand the cabin, to buy better breeding stock for the ranch you've mentioned wanting to start, enough to ensure our children have choices." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I won't live on your money, Felicity. I'm not asking you to, but I won't pretend it doesn't exist either." She took his hand. "It's not my money or your pride that matters. It's our future, what we build together." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right, though folks might talk. A lawman with a rich wife. Let them. They'll have plenty more to talk about when I start insisting the school needs proper textbooks and a library. There's my troublemaking schoolmarm." He kissed her temple. "All right, we pool our resources, make decisions together, though I draw the line at fancy curtains. We'll see about that." News of the engagement spread through Whispering Pines like wildfire. Within hours, well-wishers were arriving at the cabin with congratulations and offers of help. The women immediately began planning, despite Felicity's protests about keeping it simple. "Nonsense," declared Mrs. Chen. "The sheriff and the woman who helped bring down Blackwood, this town needs a celebration." Nathan bore the attention with resigned good humor, though Felicity caught him rubbing his side when he thought no one was looking. That evening, after the last visitor left, she made him sit while she checked his bandages. "You're overdoing it," she scolded gently. "Worth it," he said, catching her hand. "To see you happy, to feel hope again." "Are you sure about this?" "About me, I'm not Sarah. Nathan, I'm prickly and argumentative, and I'll probably terrorize the school board within a month." "I'm counting on it." His expression grew serious. "You're right, you're not Sarah. Sarah was my first love, young and sweet and perfect for who I was then. You're my second chance, complex and challenging and exactly what I need now. I love you for who you are, not as a replacement for what I lost." Tears stung her eyes. "When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between bleeding out and waking up to find a beautiful woman reading Wordsworth to me." He pulled her onto his lap, careful of his injuries. "I love you, future Mrs. Read, all of you, even the parts that will drive me to distraction." "Especially those parts," she corrected, making him laugh. 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of preparations. Felicity's dress arrived from Denver, simple ivory silk with modest bustle, elegant without being ostentatious. Nathan had his suit tailored and even submitted to a proper haircut, though he drew the line at pomade. The night before the wedding, they sat on his porch for what would be the last time as unmarried people. Tomorrow, Felicity would move her belongings from the boarding house to the cabin that would become their home. Nervous, Nathan asked. Terrified, she admitted. Not of marriage, but what if I'm not good at it? What if I can't be the wife you deserve? What if I can't be the husband you deserve? He countered. What if the nightmares come back? What if I see Blackwood's men in every shadow? Then we'll face it together. She leaned against his shoulder. That's what marriage is. Isn't it not perfection, but partnership? Sarah used to say marriage was just agreeing to annoy the same person for the rest of your life. Felicity laughed. I like that. I promise to annoy you thoroughly and consistently. And I promise to annoy you right back. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge over the mountains. Tomorrow would bring new vows, new beginnings. But tonight was for quiet appreciation of the journey that had brought them here, from blood and violence to love and hope. Thank you, Felicity said softly. For what? For finding me under that tree, for refusing to let me die, for showing me I was stronger than I knew. She turned to face him. For loving me enough to live when dying would have been easier. Thank you, he replied. For being too stubborn to let me go. For seeing past the badges and guns to the man underneath. For making me believe in tomorrow again. The kiss they shared was gentle, full of promise for all the tomorrows to come. When they finally parted, Nathan stood, helping her to her feet. One more night, he said. Then you're stuck with me. Looking forward to it. Sheriff Reed. She drove back to town in the wagon, humming softly behind her. Nathan watched until the darkness swallowed her, then went inside to prepare for the morning that would change everything. His mother's ring had found its home. Sarah's ghost rested peaceful, and Nathan Reed, who had thought love a luxury he'd never afford again, prepared to marry a woman who'd taught him that sometimes the best things came from the worst circumstances. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The little church in Whispering Pines had never looked finer. October sunlight streamed through windows polished to brilliance, illuminating the faces of what seemed like every soul in town. Nathan stood at the altar in his black suit, Marshal Thornton beside him, trying not to fidget with his collar. Stop fussing, Thornton murmured. You face down outlaws without breaking a sweat. Outlaws are simple, Nathan replied. They just want to shoot you. Women want you to remember anniversaries and notice when they change their hair. Thornton chuckled. Sarah trained you well. Not well enough, apparently. Felicity's already got me agreeing to things I swore I'd never do. Like dancing at our own wedding. The church door opened, and Mrs. Patterson entered, beaming. The signal. Nathan straightened as the congregation rose, turning toward the back of the church. And then there she was. Felicity walked down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Morrison, who'd agreed to give her away. Her dress was simple elegance itself, her dark hair swept up with small white flowers woven through it. But it was her smile that stopped Nathan's heart, radiant, confident, and aimed straight at him. Breathe, Thornton advised softly. Nathan did, drinking in the sight of this woman who'd crashed into his life bleeding and desperate, and somehow became everything. When she reached him, Doctor, Morrison placed her hand in Nathan's with paternal care. Take care of her, the doctor said quietly. With my life, Nathan promised. Reverend Daniels began the ceremony, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and hope. Nathan barely heard the words, too lost in Felicity's eyes, in the warm pressure of her hands in his. The rings, Daniels prompted. Thornton produced them, Nathan's mother's ring now properly sized, and a plain gold band for Nathan that Felicity had ordered from Denver. As Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, he remembered another wedding, another woman, another life, but instead of pain, he felt only gratitude. Sarah had taught him to love. Felicity had taught him to love again. Nathan, Felicity's voice was soft, concerned. He realized he'd paused, lost in memory. "I'm here," he said, meaning it fully. Present, not haunted, ready for this future they were claiming. When Daniels pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed his bride with tender reverence, mindful of their audience, but unable to hide the joy that flooded through him. The congregation erupted in cheers, and suddenly they were surrounded by well-wishers. The reception at the town hall was everything Nathan had claimed to not want and secretly loved. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every household. Amos Turner's fiddle filled the air with music. Children ran between adults' legs while their parents toasted the couple with whatever spirits they'd managed to procure. "You have to dance with me," Felicity said, tugging Nathan toward the cleared floor. "You promised." "I promised to try," he corrected. "No guarantees about your toes surviving the experience." But when he took her in his arms, the steps came easier than expected. They moved together as they had through danger and recovery, in sync, attentive to each other's rhythms. "You've been practicing," Felicity accused. "Mrs. Chen might have given me some lessons," Nathan admitted. "Woman's a tyrant. Threatened to burn my biscuits if I didn't cooperate." "I'll have to thank her." Felicity leaned closer. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only a dozen times. I'm hoping for at least 20 before sundown." She laughed, the sound bright as morning. Around them, other couples joined the dancing. Nathan caught sight of several young men eyeing Felicity with disappointment. The beautiful Eastern school teacher was now permanently off the market. "No regrets?" he asked. "Only one," she said. "I wish my parents could have met you. They would have loved you." "Even though I'd dragged their daughter into gunfights and danger." "Especially then. They valued courage above all else." She smiled. "Though my mother would have had words about the state of your kitchen. We'll need to expand that first thing." "Already making changes. Mrs. Reed." "Get used to it, Mr. Reed." As the afternoon wore on, Nathan found himself watching Felicity interact with their neighbors. She had a gift for making people comfortable, drawing out the shy children who would soon be her students, listening intently to the older women's advice about frontier housekeeping. This was what he'd hoped for her, not just survival, but belonging. "She's good for you," Thornton said, appearing at Nathan's elbow with 2 glasses of whiskey. "Haven't seen you this relaxed in years." "She's good for everyone," Nathan replied, accepting the drink. "Already planning to revolutionize the school, start a lending library, organize a women's auxiliary for the church." "Town won't know what hit it." "Neither did I," Nathan admitted. "One day I'm a bitter widower going through the motions. Next I'm married to a force of nature from Boston." "Life's funny that way. Sarah would be glad. You know, she wouldn't have wanted you to mourn forever." Nathan nodded, touching the scar on his side absently. "I know. Doesn't mean the guilt goes away easy. Being happy again. Give it time. Guilt's just love with nowhere to go. Now you've got somewhere to put it again." As evening approached, the party showed no signs of slowing, but Felicity appeared at Nathan's side. "Think we can slip away?" "Mrs. Reed, are you suggesting we abandon our own reception?" "I'm suggesting we've been social enough for one day." Her eyes held promises that made his collar feel tight again. They made their escape amid good-natured catcalls and advice they pretended not to hear. Nathan lifted Felicity onto the wagon seat, her dress spreading around her like flower petals. "Home?" he asked. "Home," she confirmed. The ride to the cabin was quiet, both lost in the magnitude of the step they'd taken. Married. The word felt foreign and familiar at once, like a coat that needed breaking in. When they reached the cabin, Nathan stopped Felicity before she could climb down. "Wait!" He came around, lifting her from the wagon and carrying her over the threshold despite her laughing protests about his barely healed injuries. "Tradition," he said, setting her down gently inside. The cabin had been transformed in their absence, Mrs. Chen and the other women had been busy. Fresh flowers adorned every surface. New curtains hung at the windows despite Nathan's earlier protests. And the bed was turned down with new linens. "It's perfect," Felicity breathed. "It's different," Nathan said, but he was smiling. "Good different." She turned in his arms, suddenly serious. "I know this isn't easy for you, bringing another woman into the home you shared with Sarah. If you need time." He silenced her with a kiss. "I need you, here, now, always. Sarah's part of who I was, but you're who I am now, who I want to be, even when I reorganize your entire life. Especially then, though I draw the line at doilies." "We'll negotiate," she said, already working on his tie. Later, as they lay entwined in the bed that had once been his alone, Nathan marveled at the peace that filled him. Not the absence of grief, but the presence of something stronger. "What are you thinking?" Felicity asked, tracing patterns on his chest, careful of the scar. "That I'm glad you're stubborn. Odd thing to think about on your wedding night. If you weren't stubborn, you'd have died under that tree, or given up during recovery, or gone back east when any sensible woman would have." He caught her hand, pressing it over his heart. "Your stubbornness saved us both." "Our stubbornness," she corrected. "You're the one who refused to leave me alone. Remember who insisted on teaching me to survive here?" "Fair point." He pulled her closer. "We're well matched then." "Perfectly matched," she agreed. Outside, night settled over the mountains, but inside the cabin, two souls who'd found each other through blood and loss celebrated the first night of their joined future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Felicity would start teaching. Nathan would return to full duty as sheriff, and they'd begin the complex dance of building a life together. But tonight was for them, for promises made and bodies joined, for the quiet joy of love found after both had thought it lost forever. In the morning, they'd wake to their new life, but for now, they held each other and counted themselves blessed. The cabin that had once echoed with ghosts now rang with whispered endearments and quiet laughter. And in the mountains above whispering pines, the stars bore witness to a love story that had begun with pain but found its way to peace. Spring would come, as springs always did, and with it, new life in ways neither could yet imagine. But that was tomorrow's gift. Tonight, Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Reed needed nothing more than each other and the promise of all the days to come. 10 years had transformed the Reed homestead into something that would have seemed impossible that first desperate night under the aspen trees. The original cabin had grown, sprouting additions like a living thing, a proper kitchen where Felicity reigned supreme, additional bedrooms, a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Gardens flourished where once only wild grass grew, and the barn housed not just Nathan's faithful bay but a small herd of horses and milk cows. But it was the sounds that marked the true change, children's laughter replacing the silence that had once haunted these walls. "Papa, look!" 7-year-old Sarah Jane Reed burst through the door, pigtails flying, clutching a handful of wildflowers. "I found the first columbines." Nathan scooped her up, marveling as always at this miracle with Felicity's dark hair and his blue eyes. "Those are beautiful. Sunshine. Should we put them on the table for Mama?" "She's teaching James his letters again," Sarah Jane reported with the slight disdain older siblings reserve for younger ones' struggles. "He keeps writing his R's backward." "Well, you did the same at his age," Nathan reminded her, carrying her to the kitchen where 5-year-old James sat at the table, tongue poking out in concentration as Felicity guided his hand. "There you go," Felicity encouraged. "Much better. CR for Reed. Like your name." Nathan paused in the doorway, struck by the scene his wife, still beautiful despite the fine lines that 10 years of frontier life had etched around her eyes, patiently teaching their son just as she'd taught dozens of Whispering Pines children over the years. The afternoon light caught the silver threads beginning to show in her hair, and Nathan thought she'd never looked more lovely. "Interrupting school," he asked. James looked up, beaming. Mama says I can start real school next year. If you keep practicing, Felicity amended, but her smile was warm. She stood, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other resting on the gentle swell of her belly where their third child grew. How was town? Quiet. Helped Tom Henderson fix his fence. Stopped by to check on Widow Martinez. Nathan set Sarah Jane down, moving to kiss his wife. How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying a very active future bronc rider, she said wryly. This one's definitely yours. Never still for a moment. All the best ones are wild, he said, hand covering hers on her stomach. Can we go to Yellowstone again? Sarah Jane piped up. Please, James has never seen the geysers. I have too, James protested. I just don't remember 'cause I was a baby. Nathan and Felicity exchanged glances over their children's heads. They'd made the trip to the newly established national park 2 years ago, a family adventure that had become legendary in the Reed household. Maybe after your brother or sister arrives, Felicity said. It's a long way to travel right now. But Mama, Sarah Jane wheedled, you said travel broadens the mind. Using my own words against me, Felicity laughed. You're definitely my daughter. Later, after supper and baths and bedtime stories, Nathan and Felicity sat on their porch watching the sun paint the mountains gold. It was the same view they'd shared that night 10 years ago when she'd agreed to wear his mother's ring. But everything else had changed. Any regrets? Nathan asked. Their evening ritual? Felicity laced her fingers through his. Not one, though I sometimes wonder what my Boston friends would think if they could see me now. Former proper lady with dirt under her nails and children climbing her skirts. They'd think you were magnificent, Nathan said firmly. Because you are. Flatterer. But she smiled, leaning against his shoulder. Do you ever think about if things had been different? If that stage hadn't been attacked? Nathan considered. Sometimes. But then we wouldn't have this. He gestured to encompass their home, their life, their family. I loved Sarah, mourned her properly. But what we've built, I don't think I'd change a moment of the path that brought us here. Even the painful parts. Especially those, they made us who we are. He shifted to face her. That frightened girl under the tree and the bitter widower who found her, they needed each other. Needed to learn that surviving wasn't enough, that living was what mattered. Listen to you, getting all philosophical. 10 years of your influence, schoolmarm. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered. Inside, one of the children called out in sleep, quickly soothed. A normal sound. A blessed sound. I've been thinking, Felicity said eventually, about writing it down, our story, not for publication, just for the children, so they know how we found each other. It hurt too much, Nathan quoted softly. Those were some of your first words to me. And you said, that's why I'm here. Felicity's eyes glistened. You kept that promise. Through gunfights and fever and long nights when the babies wouldn't sleep. You're still here. Always will be. A kick from the baby made them both smile. This one would be born in autumn, when the aspens turned gold like they had that fateful day. Full circle, Nathan thought. Should head inside, he said, standing and offering her his hand. Dr. Morrison says you need your rest. Dr. Morrison says a lot of things. Felicity grumbled, but she let him help her up. I swear, he's gotten more protective with each baby. Can't blame him. You scared us all with James. That was not my fault. How was I to know he'd decide to arrive during a blizzard? Inside, they checked on the children. Sarah Jane spread like a starfish across her bed. James curled tight with his stuffed horse. These two miracles they'd made together. With another on the way. Nathan still sometimes woke at night just to listen to them breathe, to remind himself this was real. What? Felicity asked, catching his expression. Just thinking how you saved me. We saved each other, she corrected. as she always did. As they prepared for bed, Nathan caught sight of the photograph on their dresser, their wedding portrait. Felicity radiant in her ivory dress, himself looking stunned by his good fortune. Next to it sat an older photo, edges worn from handling, Sarah and baby James, gone but not forgotten. Part of the story that had led to this moment. "Tell me again about tomorrow," Felicity said as they settled into bed, her back curved against his chest, his hand protective over their unborn child. "Tomorrow, Sarah Jane will probably try to convince us she's old enough to ride to town alone. James will finally master writing his name. You'll terrorize another school board meeting with your radical ideas about education. I'll keep the peace and pretend I don't enjoy watching you rile up the establishment. And after that? After that, we'll have supper as a family, read stories, watch the sunset, add another day to our collection of ordinary miracles." He kissed her temple. "Just like every day since you agreed to marry a broken-down sheriff with too much baggage." "Best decision I ever made," she murmured, already drifting toward sleep. Nathan lay awake a while longer, listening to the night sounds, wind in the pines, a distant owl, the creak of the house settling. 10 years ago, he'd been prepared to die, would have welcomed it, even, but a stubborn woman from Boston had refused to let him go. And in saving her, he'd saved himself. Tomorrow, they'd take the children on a picnic to the spot where it all began. He'd show them the aspen grove, tell them the story they'd heard a dozen times but never tired of. How sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes. How pain could forge strength, and loss could teach you to treasure what remained. "Thank you," he whispered to the darkness, to God, to fate, to whatever force had put Felicity Morgan on that stagecoach and led her to his territory. As if hearing his thoughts, Felicity stirred, murmuring, "Love you too." And Nathan Reed, who had once thought his life over, held his wife and felt their baby move and listened to their children breathe, and knew himself to be the richest man in Montana, not in gold or land, though they had enough of both, but in the currency that truly mattered: love, family, and the promise of all the tomorrows yet to come. The aspen trees still grew in that grove where it all began, but now, instead of sheltering a dying woman, they shaded family picnics and children's games. The scars remained, on Felicity's leg, on Nathan's side, on both their hearts, but scars were just proof of survival, markers of a life fully lived. And in a cabin that had grown into a home, filled with laughter instead of ghosts, two people who had saved each other continued writing their story, one ordinary, miraculous day at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with fellow lovers of these Wild West tales and hear your thoughts about Nathan and Felicity's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover these tales of love, courage, and redemption in the American frontier. Until next time, partners.